One of our primary philosophies or approaches to all of the work we do with animals has been this concept of chunking it down. And we started talking about this. I was just thinking about it as I was writing this PowerPoint, and it was when we first started in the work in the 80s is we really talked about chunking things down. And it's interesting because now it's fairly well known in the clicker world and so on that you want to make things into smaller pieces. So it's I'm going to give you our explanation of why we do it. So basically, we're trying to simplify things. So we make things into more bite-sized pieces you could think of. It does help us find out what's not working. And that actually can be really helpful when we break things into small steps. You can find out which parts are really difficult. And then how can you make those parts smaller? How can you make it easier? And that's the biggest thing is, how can you make it easier for the animal so that they can be successful? Same goes for people as well. So part of the criteria when we're looking at an element of the playground of higher learning is, can you make it into smaller pieces? And that is absolutely critical in terms of being able to help with animals be more successful. So it makes it easier for the dog to achieve success, and it makes it easier for the person to achieve success. And this is really important so that you can feel, none of us would like to do things that we felt that we couldn't do. So we want to make this achievable, and also it helps them to gain confidence and really feel good about you and what they're being asked to do. So here are some of the things to also consider is stop sooner rather than later. And I'm sure we've all been in that situation of thinking, wow, this is going really well. Let's just do one more thing. And if you could flip that, instead of thinking, this is going really well, what a great place to stop. I think you'd be really surprised to see how much more, how further along you end up in getting. And it's a hard one. It's a hard thing when something is going well and something that's been really difficult, perhaps for you or your dog, to say, oh, we're going to stop now. No, it doesn't mean that you can't, take a break and maybe do a little bit more later. It's just that we can get so much attachment to the outcome that we may not realize that the process is actually more difficult for the animal than we think it is. So the other thing that's kind of interesting is we don't have to replicate a problem to work with it. And that's something that people will often say, my dog, do you want me to show you what my dog does? And we'll say no. And I often use the analogy, it's kind of a silly one, but if I was a psychiatrist and someone came into my office and said, I'm a pyromaniac, they would not have to light my office on fire for me to believe them. So we believe it when people tell us that a dog has a particular issue or behaves in a certain way. And one of the things that through observation, you can usually see these little threads that go along with behaviors that might be more extreme. And that's something that is extremely helpful when it comes to the observation, so that you can start to make those thread, oh, your dog does A, this could be connected to the sort of your bigger issues. And we find that when we work on the small things, like the candles and the exercise about taking the candle light out of resistance that Edie Jane wrote about, it makes a huge difference in changing the overall response of the animal. The other thing is, if you start to feel frustrated, and usually that frustration comes because you don't know what else to do, take a break. There's no harm in taking a break. And even if something isn't going well, and I can tell you that with horses, I've had horses where people will always say, if you don't get them in the trailer this day, you'll never get them in the trailer. And that's not my experience at all. And I think that sometimes if you have a strong belief in something, that makes it true. But if you can say, you know what, we just need a break now. We all need a break. That coming back to it, you'll find that it's quite different. So here's an example. We're using a ladder in the playground, and we think that it would be useful to give our dog the experience of being able to walk through the rungs of the ladder. However, our dog just won't go near it, or they want to avoid it. And really, if you think about it from their perspective, why should they walk through the rungs of the ladder just because we want them to? So we think about chunking it down. So what could we do? We could walk across it rather than walking over it. We could make a ladder from some poles so that we could make them really wide, and wide in terms of the width of the ladder and also wide between the space between the rungs. We could put some poles beside a ladder to, to give them a little bit of a funnel to go into it. We could put a few treats in the space between the rungs to encourage them to at least take a bite. Be careful to avoid luring them through it, because I don't think that actually really teaches them anything. So you could also have people hold poles up on either side to make it feel safer for them to go over. The same thing, in fact, I would probably use that on a walkover as even more than a ladder. But do you see what I mean? We can take this idea. Now, we could also just stop and do something else completely different. And I've had many situations where there was a little bit of frustration about not being able to do something, and just simply go away from it, do something else, forget about it, and lo and behold, coming back, and suddenly the dog's going, oh yeah, I can do this. So there's a huge amount of power in that pause, which we also talk about. There's an article that I wrote about the power of pause. That's a great time for pause. So why does it matter? Well, dogs are not going to climb ladders, are they? But it can help teach more self-control. It can help gain confidence by overcoming something that they're afraid of. And even if it's not a big fear, it's much easier to get over things that you're just a little bit nervous about rather than something that's huge. They realize that humans will listen to them. And that is incredibly important for dogs, because that's what's going to help to build trust. And that's what we really need in our relationships, is for the dogs to trust us, so that they realize that we're not going to ask them to do something that either they can't do or that's really difficult. And if something is difficult, that they can tell us, and we can find a way to chunk it down and make it simpler. So where can we chunk things down? Well, we've shown you this in putting a body wrap on. We can chunk that into pieces. Introducing a harness, and this is a big one for lots of dogs. Working with touch sensitivity. Well, one approach to touch sensitivity is do a kind of flooding where you kind of hold the dog and show them that it's going to be okay, but it might not be okay for them. So we can chunk that down by using different touches, doing it for short periods of time, taking it into movement, and so on. If they have concerns about surfaces or any element such as the ladder, we have lots of ways we can chunk that down. With grooming concerns, with fear of anything, fear of strangers, of bikes, of cars. So it's up to us to kind of use our intelligence, if you will, to say, you know what, if my dog is afraid of a car, or cars moving, what would I do? So there are a lot of ways that we would do that. We would start with the car standing still. We can walk them around the car. We can take them a greater distance. There's just, the only thing we're limited by is our ability to actually think about things from the animal's point of view. It doesn't matter if we think that they're silly or they're acting silly about being afraid of something. It only matters what the animal thinks. So we're going to, in the last unit of this course is it's called Applied T-Touch, and we're going to really get into the details of how you can approach the fear of vets, harness sensitivity, fear of grooming, whatever that may be, so that you can start to really think, how can we apply these tools, and how do we simply take it into the principles of chunking things into smaller pieces or simplifying them. I think you'll find that your life is a lot easier, and so will your relationship be with your dog.